What is up, YouTube? My name is Evan, and today we are starting a new thing on Thursday, and Theme Deck Thursdays are going to be out for a little while, but that's okay, because what we are going to do is we are making another run to regionals, and this run to regionals will be to Houston Regionals in the beginning of our 2015-2016 season. And what's interesting about regionals this go around is that the entire event, as far as, well, the main event, the main tournament, is going to be entirely in expanded format, which is everything from black and white all the way up to the current set of Ancient Origins and everything in between. That's a lot of cards. Now, in some ways, it's not that different because a lot of the power stuff is kind of in the newer sets. So in some ways, it's not that different from Modified. But still, there's a lot of support in the older sets that's kind of important. Some support Pokemon, some supporter cards, and some items that can have a definite influence and enable certain decks to exist. Now, there were some rumors about a ban list. Of course, those rumors were unsubstantiated and they're not true. The only banned card is the card that's banned in every format, and that's Lysander's Trump card. Bad news for Trump card, but good news for the average citizens of the world, as it were. So what we're doing in this video is we are summarizing all the decks I've kind of put out on deck. No pun intended, but the things I'm thinking of playing, and there are a lot of them, and I've kind of considered and I've skimmed through all the lists of all the cards for the most part, and there may be a couple of things I haven't thought of that I'll add in later, but what we're doing here is we're getting all the preliminaries, and some of these have a better chance of being played than others by me. But these are things that I think I either have the cards or could get the cards for them, and I think they could be my play style potentially, and I could rock them pretty well. The first thing is a dark deck, but very specifically I'm thinking of Mega Tyranitar, Yveltal EX, Darkrai, and things like Dark Patch to support it. And my thinking is these are decks that could all benefit from Dangerous Energy and the Dark Patch, and Mega Turbo would be good for the Mega T-Tar, and Darkrai giving everybody free retreats could be pretty amazing, and just laying down a lot of damage, hitting people pretty hard. You could also mess around with things like Sableye, kind of junk hunting. Could be worth playing around with. I just think it'd be fun. I'm a little concerned about the speed on that deck, but the power is definitely there, and you could do some cool tactical messing around kind of stuff with Darkrai, because Darkrai is always just options, and we could power things up pretty quickly, and then obviously free retreat your active and bring in something like Mega T-Tar and go bananas. So it's a very synergistic deck with a lot of power that I like, and it's not terrifically bank breaking. So that is one cool option. Another one is Exeggutor Vileplume. I didn't have any of those handy, so I decided to use Forest of Giant Plants to represent it, because after all, that's more or less what makes the deck work, I think, in this format. And basically, of course, the idea is to get a lock with Vileplume preventing item plays, and then Exeggutor using what I'm trying to say, blockade of returns, so that they can't play supporters either. So there's supporter and item locked, which locks out half their deck, and you can set it up ridiculously quickly with Forest of Giant Plants. Like if you go second, you've got your lock that turn quite easily, and then you just beat them to death with Exeggutor slowly, and you can play around with your own supporter lineup to mess with them and do stuff, and you can probably incorporate Ariados into that deck, and there are other ways you can do it to kind of accelerate the damage to your opponent. So it's definitely got some interesting options. I think it's a little clunky because it's got a lot of Pokemon you're probably going to have to run, but I think you could easily get around that with early game Ultra Balls, before your Vileplume gets set up, obviously. Level Balls and things like that. It's a scary deck. It's not necessarily the most fun thing to play, but we're playing to win, not necessarily, get our jollies off. Sometimes, you gotta trade a little bit of the fun for, is this going to work? Is it good in the environment? So we'll see how those things balance out. This card just enables a lot of things too. Another thing I was considering was Durant Devour. It's a deck I kind of actually like, and I think a lot of our opposition in the field is going to be drawing through their own decks very quickly to make things happen. And so Devour Durant is amazing, as you don't really have to run any EXs, although you could run Aegis/EX. But you don't have to run a lot of things that cough up a lot of prizes when they're knocked out, basically. And you could probably shred a lot of decks this way. It's something a lot of people don't anticipate playing against. And you could do a lot of ignoring what your opponents do and just have them help you deck them out, and there's not much they can do about it, kind of thing. But that said, there are some decks that could take you in hand pretty easily, and I think a lot of decks will be OHKOing your Durants and pretty much everything else in a single turn. So you definitely need some kind of good defense to go with the Durants. Maybe use them a little more strategically. That's kind of hard to say, but yeah, I still think it's a good option. It's a powerful option, and it's a deck I enjoy playing for whatever twisted reason. So it's worth mentioning. Also, Vespiquen, I mean, you could also use Plasma Flareon, but I think Vespiquen's support is a little better. There are a number of incarnations of this deck, combining it with various things. You can combine it with Vileplume, you could not combine it with Vileplume, play it a little more turbo-y, which is kind of how I like it. Just kind of forgetting Vileplume to make Vespiquen work. This deck is pretty much as good in Expanded as it is in Modified, and I think it's a very powerful deck that not everybody necessarily appreciates, but with the right build, this deck could be pretty scary, pretty efficient. And anybody who's trying to pull off some kind of crazy combo, you can easily shred through them, and you don't surrender a lot of prizes when stuff gets knocked out and whatnot, things like that. So that's definitely a deck I'm thinking could be worthwhile. Aromatisse Toolbox, because we'll have access to a lot of multicolored energies in the format, so I think Aromatisse could be really cool, because you get the Rainbow and the Prism energy again, so you could just run Aromatisse with a toolbox deck, basically, of all kinds of powerful EXs and maybe a Mega, maybe? I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead. But basically just anti-meta and the best things in the meta all wrapped into one neat package with Aromatisse supporting it. I loved this deck when it was modified legal. It was very powerful. I like it a lot, and anytime I can play it again, I can get away with it, I really want to consider it. Another thing that's really unusual, but like I say, we're throwing everything on the table, is Shiftry. With Forest of Giant Plants, this guy can get out very quickly. You could combine him with something like Vileplume. That could work. You certainly don't have to. And with like Skyfield and stuff, this guy could be scary. And I used him in Modified to great success with Seismitoad. And those of you who are watching this right now who've played that deck, that deck is it's one of those things like it looks like it shouldn't work, but it does, and it's pretty scary. So I don't necessarily know if we should combine it with Seismitoad, but it's an amazingly good Pokemon, very underrated, and this could be the time. Because you can get around a lot of locks by drawing with the Leaf Draw, and so kind of still get into stuff. And Drainage Dance OHKOs a lot of things. So, speaking of the devil, and I use the term very advisedly, Seismitoad EX makes a lot of sense, I think. I think in any format, basically, where he's legal, he's always going to be considered. Anything that can't survive Seismitoad, I think, needs to think you need to think about it really strongly whether or not you should run it. But Seismitoad, he works, he deals out good damage, he locks pretty much everything, he's worthy of attention. He can combine with like almost anything else to make the deck. Anything that likes DCE anyway can go very well with him. So he's definitely worth considering some version of Seismitoad EX just because, well, Quaking Punch. Another thing that I think is pretty much kind of a dog of all seasons is Mega Manectric. He can power lots of things up while simultaneously doing damage, having free retreat for pivots. I am a great fan of this card, and yes, even in a format like Expanded, where you got a lot of other things, combining him with something else to kind of make some cool combos and power-ups, they're worthy of consideration. I don't know if he'll be able, fast enough to be worthwhile, but it's definitely worth considering him. He's in that list. I'm also thinking about Metal, and this is essentially Bronzong Metal, but I think Aegislash deserves attention because Aegislash is probably going to be very effective at blocking a lot of the more aggressive decks, because a lot of them are probably going to be relying on special energy. Like this thing just totally walls Vespiquen, for example. So, and Mega Rayquaza is another one because he tends to have that double dragon. So, while he certainly doesn't completely wall the decks, he makes their life very hard, which buys you turns to get your own setup. Metal is a good deck, and it's got lots of cool options, especially in a broader format. So Metal is obviously there. And speaking of things that like to power stuff up on the bench, Eels are an option for the old Rayquaza EX or whatever. That Dynamotor is just a great way to power things up. We have access to it. We have Level Ball. All kinds of cool tricks we can use to get that up, get it up quickly, do lots of tricks. I mean, heck, you could even combine these two if you wanted to be really sick and twisted and use something that has a ridiculously high energy cost for some reason. I mean, you could do it. I don't know if you want to, but you could. So like I say, it's on the list because whenever you have access to this or like Bronzong, you want to consider it. Another thing that's kind of on my mind is Lucario EX and just fighting in general, but I think this guy's a good poster child, him and Hawlucha. Just fighting aggression at their finest, I think that's definitely something to consider. I think it could be a great deck. I think it's a great option. Just aggressing. When in doubt, attack. Strike hard, strike fast, strike often, as Patton said, and you know what? It makes a lot of sense. It really works. And I think it could cut through a lot of the I'm trying to do something big and janky and combo-y, and in the process I kind of trip over my own feet. Sometimes I'm guilty of that. So I think that quite possibly just, cutting through all the red tape and just bashing stuff in the face with fighting types still works. Anybody who can score one-hit KOs on most decks every turn, that's awesome. With the right setup, I think it could be a thing. Something that might be able to pull it off, I'm a little skeptical, but I want him on the list anyways, Camerupt EX. There's, once again, the support's there. And in a format where everybody's trying to power up real quick, this guy just smashes faces, and with, let's say, Muscle Band, he doesn't even have to get anything right on his tumbling attack to one-shot Vespiquen, so that's kind of an interesting thing to note. I don't know if he'll make the grade necessarily, but like I say, with the support, I want to be inclusive of him. And finally, last but not least, we've got Mega Rayquaza, and both forms of Mega Rayquaza could work, but I kind of like the Dragon one, and yeah, there are like eels and stuff too to support him. There's a lot of stuff that could go with him. His Delta Wild could keep him pretty alive, and his Dragon Ascent is relatively easy to power up, and once you get it up, you just smash something every turn. You just, bop, 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 and nothing really stands up to it. Even Wailord EX is one-shotted, so that's pretty phenomenal. And he powers up with, you can use basic energies to power him up instead of double dragons if you're fearing things like Aegislash. And he gets around some things designed to stall him, although Giratina EX can present a problem. There are ways around it. But yeah, like I say, it's definitely worthy of consideration. It's a very powerful card. So that said, these are decks that I'm considering. As you can see, there are a lot of them. I got a lot of research to do. I got a lot of test playing to do. So I'm going to get to that. I'll see you next week with a much tighter list and maybe a closer look at some of these decks that I'm considering. And until next time, like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter if you haven't already, because, geez, that would be nice. That would help me. You don't ever have to pay attention to me, but, you could do it. Although, hey, I occasionally do post cool things, so you never know. Anyway, I will see you next time.